Vampires are real, and history proves it. From digging up corpses to drinking ashes, these true stories will shock you. Learn English through horror with text on screen to help you follow along. Simple language, scary stories, and unforgettable vocabulary. Ready to discover the dark side of history and improve your English? The Vampire Panic of Serbia, 1720s. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the smell of smoke and something else. Something sour like rot. Inside a tiny wooden house, a woman stared at the door, frozen. She couldn't breathe. Her brother was standing there, but he had died 3 weeks ago. They had buried him with their own hands. Yet here he was, pale, barefoot, his mouth curled into a strange smile. She screamed, and her scream echoed through the hills, waking up more than just the neighbors. Because this wasn't the first time the dead had come back. It began with whispers. A child who saw her dead father standing near the barn. A widow who swore her husband visited her each night, sitting silently at the edge of her bed. People were afraid to speak of it, but fear makes truth slippery. The more they kept quiet, the more the story spread. Then came the sickness. One by one, villagers started to fall ill. At first, it looked like a fever, but it moved quickly, too quickly. People would go to bed healthy and be dead by morning. Before they died, many of them described the same thing: a pressure on their chest, a face watching them in the dark, the feeling of being drained. They said, "He came back. She touched me in the night. I felt the cold of the grave." No one left their home after sunset. Doors were sealed. Garlic hung from every window. Wooden crosses were nailed above beds. Mothers held their children tighter at night. And still, people kept dying. The village priest tried to calm them. He said, "It is God's will." But no one was listening anymore. Soon, talk turned to action. The villagers decided to dig up the dead. They started with Petar Blagojevich. He had been buried 10 days earlier. His wife died soon after. Then his son. Then 3 neighbors, all of whom said they saw Petar after his death. When they opened his grave, they expected to find bones and rot. Instead, they found him, lying peacefully, his cheeks full, his nails longer than before, blood at the corners of his mouth. Some said his eyes were open. A soldier vomited. Another made the sign of the cross. No one spoke as a wooden stake was lifted. The first strike didn't do it, it was the second. They said he screamed. They burned his body and scattered the ashes, and then they kept digging. Grave after grave, they pulled out bodies that hadn't decayed, bodies that looked too alive. Each one was staked, burned, or beheaded. The smell of smoke and death filled the valley for days. What happened next wasn't legend. The Austrian army wrote it down, every word. Their reports reached Vienna. From there, the story spread to Germany, to France, even to England. People everywhere were asking the same question. Were the dead walking, or were the living losing their minds? But the people of that Serbian village didn't care about Europe's opinion. They had seen what they had seen. They had burned what they needed to burn. And when the sun rose over the hills the next morning, the village was quiet again. Too quiet, because something had changed. This wasn't just a sickness. This was something older, something deeper, something hungry. The Highgate Vampire, London. It's the year 1970. In North London, there's an old graveyard called Highgate Cemetery. It's cold. Fog covers the ground. The trees are tall and quiet. The gravestones are broken and leaning. It looks like a place ghosts would live. One evening, a young couple is walking near the cemetery. They stop. they see something strange. Behind the bars of a tomb, a tall, dark shape is standing still. The woman gasps. She says its eyes are glowing red. They run, and soon, others start seeing it too. At first, people think it's just a ghost story, a joke. But more and more people report the same thing. A man walking his dog sees a shadow floating across the path. A teenage girl faints at a funeral. She says something cold touched her neck. A group of boys sneak into the cemetery at night. One of them screams. He says he saw a face with no eyes. The newspapers get interested. One headline says, "Vampire in Highgate?" And just like that, London is talking about vampires. A man named David Farrant writes to the newspaper. He says he saw something in the graveyard too, a gray shape floating above the ground. He starts spending his nights at Highgate, watching. Then another man appears. His name is Sean Manchester. He says this is no ghost, it's a vampire. A real vampire. He says it came from Romania 100 years ago, and now it's awake. He tells the news that he will find the vampire and destroy it. He says, "I will do it on Friday the 13th. That night, over 100 people climb over the cemetery walls. Teenagers with flashlights, journalists, people holding garlic and crosses. They run through the graveyard looking for the vampire. One man opens a coffin. He even tries to stab it with a wooden stick. The police come and stop them. But it's too late. The story has already gone wild. Now there are two vampire hunters, Farrant and Manchester. They argue on TV. They say bad things about each other. Some people believe them. Some people laugh. But something strange is happening. Dead animals are found in the cemetery, drained of blood. A headless body is discovered. People draw strange symbols on the graves. Fires are lit in the woods nearby. What started as a ghost story has become something darker. The police arrest both men. They are charged with breaking into graves and disturbing the dead. But the Highgate vampire is never found. Some say it was all just made up. Others believe it's still there, sleeping in the tombs. Even now, people still visit Highgate Cemetery at night. Some say they see a tall figure in black, watching them from the shadows. Maybe it was never real. Maybe it was just fear and imagination. Or maybe it's still waiting. Mercy Brown, America's Last Vampire. Rhode Island, 1892. It's a freezing morning in rural Rhode Island. The trees are bare. The snow crunches beneath heavy boots. In the center of a quiet graveyard, a man stands alone. His name is George Brown. He's a farmer, a father, a man who has lost too much in too little time. He looks down at a grave covered in snow. The name carved on the stone, Mercy Brown, his daughter, dead at just 19, 2 months buried, but now he's here to dig her up. Why would a grieving father open his own daughter's coffin? The answer lies in what happened before Mercy died. The Brown family was no stranger to death. First it was George's wife, then his eldest daughter, both taken by a slow, wasting illness, pale skin, hollow eyes, coughing up blood. No one understood it. And now his son, Edwin, his only son, is dying too. At first they thought it was just bad luck, or maybe a curse, but the neighbors had another theory. They whispered it behind closed doors. They said someone was feeding, not someone living, someone dead. The townsfolk remembered stories from the old country, warnings passed down from Europe about the dead who refused to stay dead, who rose from the grave and drained the life from their loved ones. They had a word for them. Vampires. They believed one of the Brown women was not truly resting. that she was rising from her grave each night to feed on Edwin, the town begged George to act. He didn't believe in vampires, but he did believe his son was dying. So on a frozen March morning in 1892, he gave in. They brought shovels, a priest, a few neighbors with pale faces and shaking hands. They started with the graves of George's wife and eldest daughter. The bodies were as expected: bones, dust, decay. But then they opened Mercy's coffin, and everything changed. What did they find in her coffin that terrified the town? Mercy looked untouched. She had been buried for 2 months, but her body hadn't rotted. Her skin was pink, her face peaceful, her fingernails long and dark. Her hair had grown. But it was her heart that sealed the horror. When they cut into it, it was still full of blood, fresh, red, warm. The crowd stepped back. Some crossed themselves. Others began crying. There was no doubt in their minds now. Mercy Brown was a vampire, and she had to be stopped. They cut out her heart and her liver, burned them on a nearby rock. Then in a final desperate act, they mixed the ashes with water and fed it to Edwin. His father watched, silent. It was a grim ritual, not from science, not from medicine, but from fear. Did it work? It did not. Edwin died 2 months later, but by then, the legend had already taken root. Mercy Brown's story spread beyond Exeter. It reached New York, then Europe. Newspapers called it the vampire case of New England. Writers took notes. Even a young Bram Stoker, author of Dracula, is believed to have read about it. Mercy Brown became known as America's last vampire. But she was never a monster. She was a girl, buried in winter, dug up in fear. Her story isn't about fangs or capes. It's about grief, panic, and what people do when they're terrified of death, and even more terrified of what comes after.